You see, Avengers Doomsday might not just be the next team-up movie. It could be the MCU's darkest turning point, the moment where every journey we've seen so far finally collides, fractures, and reshapes reality itself. But here's the question that started all of this for me. What if Avengers Doomsday isn't about the heroes uniting, but about one man's journey to destroy the very concept of heroism? And another one. What if Thanos wasn't the true beginning of the end, but merely the warning shot? Welcome back to MovieCast, hosted by me, Liam Harrison. And today, we're diving deep into a theory that ties together the Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, and the upcoming Avengers Doomsday, all through one consistent thread, the idea of the journey. Now, when I rewatched Infinity War recently, something hit me. Something I couldn't unsee once I noticed it. Every Russo brothers Marvel movie has revolved around the concept of a personal journey. And not just any journey, a journey of discovery, destruction, and rebirth. In The Winter Soldier, it was Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff uncovering the horrifying truth that S.H.I.E.L.D., the very institution they believed in, was actually Hydra in disguise. That wasn't just a twist. It was a test of loyalty, identity, and belief. It forced Steve to abandon everything he knew and rebuild himself from the ashes of deception. Then in Civil War, that same theme evolved. This time, it wasn't about uncovering the corruption of an organization, it was about the corruption within a family. The Avengers, who had grown into a surrogate family across multiple films, began to fracture under moral and emotional pressure. Tony and Steve, two men with the same goal but entirely different methods, clashed in a way that redefined what right even meant in their world. And at the center of that conflict was Helmut Zemo. Not a superpowered villain, not an alien warlord, but a broken man with a plan so human, so painfully real, that it tore the Avengers apart more effectively than any cosmic threat ever could. And that's where the Russo brothers' genius lies. They don't just make superhero movies, they make journeys. Every film is about a character facing their reflection and realizing they've become something they swore to fight against. Now, fast forward to Infinity War. The focus shifts entirely. For the first time, the heroes take a back seat. The entire movie, structurally, emotionally, and thematically, is Thanos' journey. It's his quest, his sacrifice, his philosophy. We, the audience, experience the MCU through the eyes of the villain. That was a bold move. It's as if the Russo brothers said, let's make the most personal movie in the franchise about the man who wants to erase half of existence. And somehow it worked. We understood Thanos, even if we hated him. That's storytelling mastery. Then came Endgame, the emotional counterpart, the closure. It was no longer Thanos' story. It was the Avengers' final journey, a literal trip through time, confronting their pasts, correcting their mistakes, and finding meaning in loss. Each hero faced their own mirror. Tony met his father. Thor met his mother. Steve revisited Peggy. Natasha confronted her guilt. Every one of them found peace, or at least purpose, in the end. So when you look at this trajectory, the Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, it becomes crystal clear. The Russo brothers build narratives around transformation, around what happens when power, morality, and identity collide. That's why I believe Avengers Doomsday won't be an ensemble story in the traditional sense. It won't be about the Avengers teaming up to stop a villain. It'll be about Dr. Doom's journey. And this time, the journey will belong to the man who defines control itself, Victor Von Doom. Think about it. Thanos' path was one of obsession, a mad crusade to balance the universe through force. Doom's path, on the other hand, will be one of manipulation. He's not a brute. He's a strategist, a scientist, a sorcerer. He's the perfect hybrid of Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, genius intellect with mystical mastery. But what makes Doom so terrifying isn't his power. It's his humanity. Unlike Thanos, who justified mass murder as balance, Doom hides his evil beneath reason. He believes in his own righteousness. That's what makes him infinitely more dangerous. You see, Doom doesn't need to snap his fingers. He'll convince you to do it yourself. And if you trace the Russo brothers' evolution as storytellers, this fits their pattern perfectly. Every villain they've written so far wasn't purely evil. They were ideological mirrors to the heroes. Winter Soldier had Hydra, Civil War had Zemo, Infinity War had Thanos, and now Doomsday will have Doom. Except this time, the mirror reflects not one hero, but all of them. Here's where things get really fascinating. The Russos love repeating structural motifs, story blueprints that echo across movies. In The Winter Soldier, the shocking revelation that S.H.I.E.L.D. was Hydra changed how we saw the MCU. In Civil War, Zemo's manipulation exposed the emotional weaknesses of the Avengers. And in Infinity War, the ending flipped the genre itself. The villain won. Each time they end on a revelation that reshapes everything. So what could that pattern mean for Avengers Doomsday? Well, if Winter Soldier exposed an enemy hiding inside the system, and Civil War exposed an enemy hiding inside the heroes, and Infinity War exposed an enemy who was the protagonist, then Doomsday might expose something bigger, an enemy hiding inside the multiverse itself. And I think that enemy, or at least the one who discovers it, is Victor Von Doom. Now, let's rewind a little to the end of Endgame. Steve Rogers chooses to stay in the past, living out a peaceful life with Peggy Carter. It's a beautiful ending, a reward for everything he's endured. But when you really think about it, that decision carries cosmic consequences. By staying behind, Steve created a new timeline, a divergent branch. And according to Loki, that kind of decision is exactly what causes incursions, catastrophic collisions between universes. But here's the thing. In Loki Season 1, He Who Remains allowed the Avengers time travel because it was supposed to happen. He built the sacred timeline around it, which means Steve's actions were part of the grand design, until Loki took the throne and let the branches grow freely. So once those restrictions were lifted, Steve's timeline, the one where he stayed with Peggy, could have spiraled out of control. And that might be where Doom's obsession begins. Imagine this. Doom, in his relentless quest for perfection, traces the root cause of the multiverse's collapse. He follows the trails of incursions, time fractures, and reality distortions, and they all lead to one event. Steve Rogers staying in the past. In Doom's eyes, that's the original sin, the spark that set fire to the multiverse. Now picture the opening of Avengers Doomsday mirroring Infinity War's cold open. No exposition, no cheerful overture, just chaos. We see an elderly Steve living quietly with Peggy, maybe even with a family. The world looks peaceful. The music is soft. And then everything shatters. Doom appears. No army, no warning, just his voice. Time should have never allowed this. In a flash of power, everything Steve built turns to ash. Peggy disappears. The house burns. Doom doesn't kill Steve. He leaves him alive to witness the destruction of the life he stole from time. Because in Doom's mind, justice isn't mercy. It's balance. That's how Avengers Doomsday begins. Not with a team-up, not with a new hero, but with the death of peace itself. And that's where the journey theme reemerges, only now it's Doom's journey. He's not just a villain. He's a man who's lost everything, who's watched his world decay because of the arrogance of others. The same arrogance the Avengers showed when they played gods with time. But Doom doesn't just want revenge. He wants control. He sees the multiverse as a collapsing system, endless chaos caused by heroes and villains alike. Kang, Loki, the TVA, the Time Stone, the Infinity Saga, all of it, in his mind, is a result of disorder. So he decides to do what no one else dared to, rebuild the multiverse in his image. That's why he's more terrifying than Thanos. Thanos ended half of existence out of mercy. Doom will reshape all of existence out of pride. And that's what makes this theory so spine-chilling, because it means Avengers Doomsday isn't just another war. It's a reckoning. The Avengers, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, every universe will pay the price for what came before. And Doom will make sure of it. But here's where it gets even deeper. What if Doom isn't entirely wrong? Because if Steve's choice did cause the multiverse to spiral, if incursions are the result of human emotion, of love, of selfishness, then maybe Doom's mission to fix it makes sense. Maybe he's not a villain at all, but a reflection of what happens when the desire to do good becomes the need to control it. And that's where I think the Russo brothers are heading. Every one of their Marvel films has blurred the line between right and wrong, and Doomsday will push that line until it breaks. Because what's more terrifying than a villain who believes he's right? A hero who realizes he might be wrong. And that's the foundation of everything that's coming next. So, if Avengers Doomsday begins with the fall of Steve Rogers' timeline, that brutal, emotionally crushing confrontation between Doom and the man who broke time, then what happens next? This is where the real heart of the story begins. Because you see, unlike Thanos, whose motivations were built on the concept of balance, Doom's motivations are built on pain. And that's a huge difference. Thanos' ideology was cosmic. It was impersonal. He wanted to fix the universe by numbers, a cold calculation. Doom, however, acts from the scars of personal loss. He's a man who's been betrayed by the world, scarred by his own ambition, and haunted by a tragedy that he blames on the arrogance of others. If you look at the pattern of the Russo brothers' storytelling, you'll notice something fascinating. They never write villains who simply want to rule the world. Every antagonist they've created has an emotional wound at the center of their philosophy. The Winter Soldier's brainwashing was rooted in pain. Zemo's hatred came from grief. Thanos' crusade came from obsession. Doom's, his comes from guilt. Now, in the comics, Victor Von Doom's tragedy begins in Latveria. Born to a poor Romani family, he loses both of his parents, his father to persecution, his mother to the devil himself. Doom grows up believing he can outsmart fate, outthink death, outmaneuver destiny. His genius becomes both his gift and his curse. And that's the part I think the Russo brothers will lean into, the God complex born from grief. Because if there's one thing the MCU's Phase 5 and 6 are showing us, it's that grief is the ultimate catalyst. Wanda broke reality over vision. Loki redefined it through love. Strange corrupted it through fear. And Doom will conquer it through guilt. So imagine this. After the opening act where Doom destroys Steve's peaceful timeline, we cut to Doctor Strange. Not the arrogant master of the mystic arts we once knew, but a fractured man still reeling from the events of Multiverse of Madness. He's seen universes die. He's seen his own variants corrupted by the Darkhold. He knows what it means to lose control. And it's in that broken moment that he senses something different, an anomaly unlike anything he's encountered before. Not a typical incursion, not a King variant, something colder, older, smarter. He traces it back through magical disturbances, cosmic signals, and remnants of corrupted timelines, and what he finds terrifies him. He discovers a pattern. Every reality that collapses, every universe that implodes, shares one consistent anomaly, an energy signature originating from Latveria. That's how Doom enters Strange's radar. Now here's where it gets interesting. In the comics, Doom and Strange share one of the most fascinating rivalries in all of Marvel. They're both men of intellect and ego, both trying to command forces that even gods fear. And yet in the Secret War storyline, Strange actually ends up joining Doom. Not because he believes in Doom's methods, but because he sees no other way to save existence. That moral dilemma, the choice between doing what's right and doing what's necessary, is exactly what defines the Russos' style. It's what made Infinity War so powerful. Strange giving up the Time Stone wasn't cowardice, it was calculation. But what if, in one of those outcomes, he saw Doom as the only possible savior? That's the chilling idea. What if Doctor Strange already knew Doom would rise? What if the entire chain of events, from Steve staying in the past, to Loki freeing the timelines, to Strange unleashing incursions, was part of the cosmic loop Doom was destined to exploit? You see, Doom isn't a man who reacts. He prepares. He anticipates. And if you take that trait and apply it to the MCU, you get something terrifying. A villain who's been watching from the shadows, learning from the mistakes of gods. When Thanos failed, Doom learned patience. When Kang fractured time, Doom learned precision. When the Avengers resurrected the dead, Doom learned consequence. Every action they took was a lesson for him. That's why I believe the second act of Avengers Doomsday will shift from a purely emotional story into a grand-scale, cerebral war, not fought with armies, but with knowledge, manipulation, and deception. Because Doom's greatest weapon isn't magic or metal, it's understanding. Now, let's talk about Doom's power in this context. In the comics, he's both a scientist and a sorcerer, a man who bridges technology and mysticism. He builds machines that bend reality, but he also wields spells that can rewrite fate. That duality makes him unique in the MCU's current lineup. We've had characters who represent one side or the other, Tony Stark with technology, Doctor Strange with magic, but Doom combines both. He is the synthesis, and that's where the tragedy lies. Because the more he tries to fix the world, the more he becomes the thing he despises, a false god. Imagine a sequence where Strange confronts Doom for the first time. Doom stands in his armor, regal and emotionless, surrounded by ancient machinery pulsing with green energy. Strange warns him that his experiments are tearing holes in the multiverse. Doom replies, calm and measured, "You tore the holes, Doctor. I'm merely sewing them shut." That line alone could define his entire philosophy. Doom doesn't see himself as a destroyer. He sees himself as a savior. And that's the scariest kind of villain there is. One who believes he's the hero of his own story. So as Strange and Doom clash, the tone of the movie starts to shift. What began as a personal vendetta becomes a global, then cosmic crisis. Because Doom's actions, his attempt to rebuild the timeline, start triggering conflicts across realities. And that's where the X-Men enter the picture. Now, remember, the Russos love mirroring themes. In Civil War, we saw heroes versus heroes. It wasn't about good and evil. It was about ideology versus ideology. I believe Avengers Doomsday will mirror that idea, but on a multiversal scale. Instead of Team Cap versus Team Iron Man, it'll be universe versus universe. The Avengers will represent one side of the moral argument, the belief that humanity, even in its flaws, must decide its own fate. The X-Men, on the other hand, will represent the belief that evolution or intervention is necessary to survive the end of all things. And Doom? He'll stand in the middle, manipulating both sides, watching the worlds collide, not out of chaos, but out of calculation. Think of it like a cosmic chessboard, every hero a pawn, every universe a piece, and Doom the player who already knows the outcome. Now this is where the journey pattern resurfaces again, because while the first act sets up Doom's emotional journey, the second act expands it into a philosophical one. This is the moment where Doom's ideology starts to spread. People, heroes even, begin to agree with him. And that's how the Russos will twist the narrative knife. Imagine seeing Strange read Richards or even Wanda listening to Doom's logic and realizing he's not entirely wrong. That the multiverse does need order. That maybe after all this chaos, someone needs to take control. That's how villains win, not by force, but by persuasion. So, while Strange and the remaining Avengers scramble to contain the incursions, Doom starts building something extraordinary. A device that fuses magic and quantum energy. A world engine. Something that can stabilize one universe at the cost of another. And here's the cruel beauty of it. The machine works. He proves his theory. A dying universe is absorbed and another one survives. Doom literally saves reality, but at the cost of trillions of lives. That moral paradox becomes the beating heart of Doomsday. Because now, Strange faces an impossible choice. Stop Doom and risk total collapse, or let him continue and watch infinite lives perish for the sake of stability. It's the same kind of emotional no-win scenario we saw in Infinity War when Strange had to give up the Time Stone, or when Steve had to fight Tony in Civil War. The Russos thrive in moral gray areas, and Doom gives them the perfect stage to explore that again, but on a multiversal level. And here's where I think they'll insert one of their signature mirror moments. In Civil War, Tony says, "If we can't accept limitations, we're no better than the bad guys." Doom will echo that philosophy, but twist it. He'll say something like, "If we can't impose limitations, we're no better than children playing with matches." That single line, that inversion, defines the gap between hero and villain. I picture a scene that mirrors Infinity War's structure, multiple teams scattered across the multiverse, each chasing fragments of a greater puzzle. Strange and Wong hunting magical relics. Reed and the Fantastic Four investigating cosmic rifts. The X-Men dealing with the fallout of mutant incursions. And in the shadows, Doom watching it all unfold like a director watching his film. And here's the brilliant, chilling twist. Every mission, every lead, every clue, all of it leads back to Doom because he planned it that way. Every battle they win is a step in his grand design. Every discovery brings them closer to the truth. But it's a truth he wants them to see. He's not trying to stop the incursions anymore. He's testing the heroes, proving that they'll always make the same mistakes, always choose emotion over logic, always fail to see the bigger picture. By the midpoint of the film, Doom's ideology has already taken root. Some heroes secretly side with him. Strange becomes conflicted. Reed starts to doubt the Avengers' methods. Even the TVA, remnants of Kang's system, begin to see Doom as the reset they've been waiting for. And then comes the defining midpoint moment, the shattering event. In Infinity War, it was the death of Gamora. In Civil War, it was the reveal of the Winter Soldier killing Tony's parents. In Doomsday, it'll be the collapse of an entire universe. Imagine this. Strange and the Avengers finally locate the source of Doom's world engine. They confront him, battle him, nearly stop him. And in his final act of defiance, Doom activates it. A single universe, maybe one that includes heroes we've grown to love, disintegrates before their eyes. Gone. Wiped from existence. And Doom doesn't flinch. He simply says, "Now you understand." The silence that follows would hit harder than any explosion. Because for the first time, the heroes realize they're fighting someone who doesn't fear loss, someone who embraces it. And that's the turning point. The heroes regroup, fractured and shaken. Strange questions his own role in creating this mess. The Avengers doubt their own judgment. The X-Men blame the Avengers for their arrogance. The multiverse begins to crumble faster than ever. And in the midst of it all, Doom stands tall, calm, resolute, convinced that the only way forward is through him. That's when we truly understand the scope of his plan. Doom doesn't want to end the multiverse. He wants to consolidate it, to merge the surviving realities into a single, controlled existence. His version of paradise. The seeds of Battleworld begin here. But of course, we're not there yet. Not fully. This act is about descent, the slow unraveling of trust, the ideological infection that spreads across the heroes. By the time it ends, the Avengers aren't united anymore. Strange is torn between logic and morality. And Doom? He's already won half the battle because he's convinced everyone that maybe, just maybe, his way is the only way left. That's the brilliance of the setup. It's not a war of fists. It's a war of faith. And the heroes, for the first time since Thanos, start to wonder if they're on the wrong side of history. By the time Doom activates the world engine and wipes out an entire universe, the multiverse itself begins to scream. Reality bends, physics twists, and you can almost feel the MCU's fabric tearing apart thread by thread. What started as a philosophical argument has become a cataclysm that no one truly understands anymore. And here's where everything changes. The war doesn't begin with a declaration, it begins with silence. That eerie moment after Doom says, "Now you understand." The surviving heroes just stand there, shocked, powerless. Doctor Strange, Wanda, Reed Richards, even Thor. They stare into the cosmic void where a universe used to be. There's no debris, no sound, no explosion. Just absence. The truest form of death. I can almost picture it cinematically. Strange whispering, "He did it." Thor lowering his hammer, whispering, "A world gone." And Doom, unmoved, walking through the haze, his voice cutting through the void like iron. "You call yourselves protectors. You protect nothing." That's when it hits them. Doom isn't a villain in his own mind. He's a reformer. He's doing what he believes the gods failed to do, reset creation. Now remember the Russo brothers' pattern of escalation. They always shift from personal stakes to global, then to existential. Winter Soldier was about loyalty. Civil War was about ideology. Infinity War was about destiny. And Endgame was about legacy. So what's Doomsday about? Control. Control over existence, over consequence, over fate itself. And that's why Act 3 becomes the most crucial turning point. This is where the war for control begins, not just between heroes and Doom, but between the heroes themselves. The movie starts to fracture the same way Civil War did, but this time, there's no government act dividing them. The division comes from within. Strange, haunted by the collapse of a universe, becomes consumed by the need to stop Doom, but not through compassion, through power. He begins experimenting with darker magic, fragments of the Darkhold he secretly kept hidden after destroying it. Wong warns him, but Strange dismisses it. We're beyond rules now. Meanwhile, Reed Richards is obsessed with understanding Doom's machine. He's not thinking emotionally. He's thinking like a scientist. If it worked once, he says, then it can be controlled. Sue Storm can see it in his eyes, that same spark of curiosity that once drove Victor himself. And she's terrified. On the other side, the Avengers are splintered. Thor, still recovering from the loss of countless lives, believes Doom must die no matter the cost. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, hesitates. He knows revenge won't fix anything. And somewhere in between them, Bruce Banner tries to calculate the probability of multiversal collapse, realizing that if even one more universe falls, the chain reaction will consume them all. That's when we cut back to Doom. Alone in his citadel, surrounded by glowing sigils and quantum energy, he removes his mask for the first time. His face is still scarred, not just physically, but emotionally. And we see flashbacks. The death of his mother, the loss of his people, the betrayal of his own ambition. But then something new, a vision, a glimpse of a cosmic realm beyond even the TVA's comprehension, shapes voices, beings watching him, the Beyonders. Now for comic fans, that name sends chills. Because the Beyonders are the gods behind the multiverse, entities who created and destroy realities for sport. They were the true cause of the incursions. And in this theory, Doom discovers them. He realizes the truth. The multiverse isn't collapsing by accident. It's collapsing by design. The Beyonders created the chaos as an experiment, and the heroes, the villains, every single death and rebirth were all variables in a cosmic equation. Doom doesn't just hate them, he vows to replace them. That revelation transforms his mission. He's no longer trying to fix the multiverse, he's trying to usurp its creators. This is where the narrative scale explodes. Doctor Strange, now aware of Doom's growing power, reaches out across realities for help. He uses the sling ring to open portals not just to other worlds, but to entirely different cinematic universes. We could see glimpses of characters from Fox's X-Men, the Sony Spider-Man worlds, maybe even animated variants like What If. Strange realizes that if Doom truly merges the multiverse, all of existence, every version of every hero is on the line. But this rescue mission comes with consequences. When Strange opens those portals, he accelerates the incursions even further. Reality starts to melt. Time collapses inward. Dimensions bleed together. You might even get surreal visuals. Asgard merging with Wakanda, the Sanctum Sanctorum floating above a desert from another Earth. It's chaos. Beautiful. Apocalyptic chaos. In the middle of that storm, Doom makes his next move. He approaches the surviving universes not as a conqueror, but as a savior. He broadcasts his message across the multiverse using ancient magic and quantum energy. Your gods have abandoned you. Your heroes failed you. I will not. And believe it or not, people start listening. Entire civilizations, broken by incursions, begin worshiping Doom as a messiah. They kneel before his holographic form, promising allegiance in exchange for survival. Doom forms his own army, not of soldiers, but of believers. He calls them the Restored. And this is where the Russos' political storytelling instincts would shine. Because now the question becomes moral, not physical. When existence is collapsing, is survival worth submission? Strange sees the danger immediately. He's not saving them, he says. He's conditioning them. But the Avengers are losing hope. Sam argues, if Doom can stop the collapses, maybe we need to let him. It's the same argument Tony made in Civil War, trading freedom for safety. History repeating itself, but on a multiversal scale. Meanwhile, the Fantastic Four become the emotional core of this act. Reed feels responsible for Doom's path. After all, in many versions of their story, Reed and Victor were once partners. Sue reminds him that trying to outthink Doom is exactly what Doom wants. But Reed can't help it. He believes if he can understand Doom's equation, he can reverse it. So he builds his own machine, a counter-world engine, powered not by stolen energy, but by hope. And this is where things get tragic. Because Doom anticipated this. He lets Reed finish it. He lets him believe he's won. And when Reed activates it, Doom channels the power back to himself, absorbing the energy and ascending to something far beyond human, the beginnings of God Emperor Doom. Visually, it's the kind of transformation that would leave theaters silent. Doom standing on a floating platform, cloaked in white light, his armor molten and divine. The ground trembles. The heroes stare up in awe and terror as he declares, "You wanted a god. I accept it." That's the end of the second act within this act, the moment of no return. Now, you might think that would be the end game itself, but the Russos always use Act 3 as the spiral before the final climb. This is where hope feels extinct. Doom reshapes the surviving fragments of the multiverse into a single plane of existence, a patchwork world made from the ruins of countless realities. Different cities, planets, and timelines stitched together. If that sounds familiar, it should, because this is the birth of Battleworld. Imagine the scope. New York floating next to Asgardian ruins, Wakanda bordering a fragment of Xandar, the TVA citadel looming in the distance like a fallen monument. Doom's throne sits at the center, built from the remnants of every destroyed universe. He calls it the last reality. And on this world, Doom makes the rules. He resurrects those who serve him, reshapes history to erase defiance, and crowns himself the protector of existence. Heroes who resist are scattered across zones of this new world, isolated, broken, stripped of power. It's the MCU's version of purgatory. Thor, stripped of his hammer, roams a desert of broken timelines. Strange, trapped in a mirror dimension, watches infinite versions of himself fade. Wanda, resurrected by Doom's magic, is forced to serve as his enforcer, a tragic echo of what she once became in Multiverse of Madness. And Reed Richards? He's imprisoned inside a quantum cell, forced to watch as Doom uses his own invention to maintain order. This is where the emotional storytelling shines, because every hero now faces their personal failure. Thor's arrogance, Strange's control issues, Wanda's grief, Reed's pride. The Russos always use pain as the crucible for growth, and here it becomes literal. But even gods make mistakes. Doom, for all his intelligence, underestimates one thing: the human spirit, the will to defy control. And this is where the seeds of rebellion start to grow. Among the ruins, a few surviving heroes begin to gather: Sam Wilson, Wong, Peter Parker, Wolverine, and a few surprising faces like Deadpool and Captain Carter. They form what I like to call the Forgotten Avengers. They're not the strongest. They're not the smartest. But they still believe in something Doom has long forgotten: choice. Wong explains to them the truth he discovered from ancient texts. Doom's power comes from siphoning the residual energy of destroyed timelines. If they can destabilize that source, they can break his control. But to do that, they'll need help from someone who understands the structure of Battleworld itself. Someone who once ruled time. Enter Loki. When Loki appears, it's not as the mischievous variant we remember. He's older, wiser, the king of the multiverse we saw at the end of his own series. He tells them something that changes everything. Doom didn't just take power. He took purpose. Every branch, every choice, every possibility, he's rewriting it in his image. And if he succeeds, free will itself dies. That line hits Sam hard. Then we take it back. So Act 3 becomes the gathering of rebellion. Small, desperate, imperfect, but it's hope. They move through Battleworld's zones, recruiting survivors, mutants, sorcerers, cosmic beings. Even some villains who realize Doom's rule leaves no room for anyone but him. There's a beautiful irony here. The same people who once tried to kill each other now unite to save the concept of existence itself. It mirrors the emotional beats of Endgame, but darker, more fractured. Instead of a clean team-up, it's chaos unified by purpose. And through it all, Doom watches. He allows the rebellion to form. Because in his mind, resistance is proof of his necessity. Every empire needs dissent, he says. Without it, perfection is meaningless. That single line encapsulates Doom's tragic flaw. He needs opposition to validate his godhood. The act ends with the rebels finally reaching the heart of Battleworld, Doom's citadel. Loki and Strange work together to open a portal into the core, where Doom stores the multiversal energy that sustains his power. But before they can reach it, Doom appears, levitating above them, calm as ever. "I gave you paradise," he says. "You chose chaos." And Strange, eyes blazing with defiance, replies, "You didn't give us paradise. You stole possibility." Lightning cracks. The final confrontation begins. But just before the screen cuts to black, one last twist. As Strange and Doom clash, reality flickers. A voice echoes through the void. deep, omnipotent alien, the Beyonders, speaking for the first time. You presume to steal creation from its creators. Doom looks up, defiant. Not steal perfect. And then silence. The light engulfs everything. A blinding white void, a promise of gods entering the battlefield. The heroes are broken, scattered. Doom stands alone, facing powers beyond imagination. And somewhere, deep in the chaos, Strange opens his eyes, realizing that the final war has just begun. The screen fades from that blinding white light, and when Vision returns, we're no longer looking at Battleworld the way it was. The sky has cracked open. Time itself looks bruised. Shapes far larger than planets move behind the clouds, silhouettes of beings older than the concept of life. The Beyonders have arrived. Up until now, Doom's arrogance felt almost rational. His intellect gave him the illusion of control. But this is the moment that illusion shatters. Because for the first time since we met him, Victor Von Doom looks afraid. The Beyonders' voices don't sound like speech, more like vibrations inside the soul. You claim dominion over what was never yours. Their words ripple through the fabric of Battleworld, bending mountains, twisting oceans. The people on the ground, Avengers, mutants, civilians torn from destroyed worlds, feel it in their bones. Every heartbeat stutters in unison. And Doom, glowing with the power of 1,000 timelines, raises his hand and shouts back, "You abandoned creation! I saved it!" Lightning erupts around him, green and gold, colliding with the celestial light of the Beyonders. The energy tears open entire continents of Battleworld. Reality becomes watercolor, dripping, reforming, melting again. For a moment, you can't even tell who's winning. Down below, the surviving heroes scramble for cover. Strange conjures shields that disintegrate on contact. Loki stands silent, analyzing the rhythm of the Beyonders' power like a conductor studying a symphony. Sam Wilson pulls civilians into the remains of a crumbling fortress, shouting, "Move! Now!" while Wolverine slices through debris raining from the sky. It's chaos on a level even Thanos never unleashed. And yet amid that chaos, something incredible happens. Doom begins absorbing the Beyonders' energy, not deflecting it, consuming it. His armor glows white hot, the runes on his gauntlets rewriting themselves faster than any spell ever cast. Strange stares in disbelief. He's learning their language, he murmurs. He's rewriting the laws of creation in real time. That's the kind of escalation the Russos love. A scene where the impossible becomes terrifyingly logical. Doom isn't stronger, he's smarter. He realizes the Beyonders' power isn't mystical or technological, it's conceptual. They create by defining, by writing reality into existence. And Doom, the ultimate scientist sorcerer, figures out how to hack definition itself. He speaks one word, mine. The sky implodes. The Beyonders recoil, their forms distorting like reflections on broken glass. One by one, they collapse into fragments of light that spiral into Doom's body. When the dust settles, he floats above Battleworld, transformed again. His armor has become living energy. His eyes are twin suns. For all intents and purposes, Doom is now a god. The silence that follows feels heavier than sound. The rebels, scattered across the landscape, look up at the glowing figure in the sky. Sam whispers, "Please tell me that's not victory." Loki answers flatly, "It's worse. He just killed God." This is the midpoint of Act 4, the moment of transcendence. Doom has achieved everything he wanted, absolute control. He descends to the ground, every step leaving trails of gold fire. Around him, the fabric of Battleworld stabilizes, reshaping into symmetry. Mountains straighten. Rivers flow in geometric patterns. The sun freezes at the perfect angle. It's beautiful, horrifyingly beautiful. Doom surveys his creation. No more chaos, he says quietly. No more loss. But perfection is suffocating. The people begin to realize they can't move without permission. Time no longer flows naturally. Every second is pre-approved by Doom's will. When a child tries to pick a flower, the stem refuses to break. Reality won't allow unscripted motion. That's when Strange understands the final cost. Doom hasn't saved reality. He's paused it. Life is no longer alive, it's archived. The rebellion regroups in the shadows of what used to be New York. Loki sketches sigils in the sand. Strange watches the sky for patterns in Doom's energy, and Sam tries to keep the terrified survivors from giving up. He wants us to believe this is paradise, Sam says. But paradise without choice is just another prison. Strange nods. Then we give creation back its heartbeat. The plan they form is pure Russo-style escalation, intimate emotion driving impossible stakes. Strange and Loki will infiltrate Doom's citadel, the exact place where his consciousness interfaces with the rewritten multiverse. Sam and the others will draw Doom's attention on the surface, staging what looks like a full-scale uprising. The odds are absurd. They know it. That's what makes it human. Cut to Doom, seated on his throne, a floating monolith surrounded by rings of orbiting script, every line of code a rewritten law of existence. He watches the rebellion gather below and almost smiles. Hope, he muses, the universe's most persistent error. He raises his hand, and the sky fractures again, not from violence, but from design. He rewinds time 30 seconds, trapping the rebels in a loop. Every attempt to attack resets itself. They're fighting a god who can edit reality like a film reel. Wong realizes it first. He's turned the multiverse into his timeline! But Loki has been waiting for this. Using the residual energy of the temporal loom, the device that once maintained the sacred timeline, he crafts a counter loop inside Doom's system. It's messy, dangerous, and brilliant. He whispers to Strange, the trick to tricksters is to let them see the trick. They slip through the cracks of Doom's repeating moment, stepping into the citadel as phantoms between seconds. Inside they find the heart of everything, the core of definition, a pulsating sphere of symbols representing every choice that ever existed. Strange stares at it, mesmerized. This is creation itself. Loki grins, half sad, and we're about to pickpocket God. As they work, we cut back to the surface. Sam and the others fight shadows of their own memories, Doom's defense mechanism. Thor battles a vision of himself from Endgame, broken and guilty. Wolverine faces Jean Grey consumed by the Phoenix. Each fight forces them to confront the pain Doom believes justifies his rule. It's psychological warfare rendered literal. Through it all, the score would build like a heartbeat returning to a body. Inside the Citadel, Strange and Loki finally breach the core. It glows with infinite possibilities, timelines branching like neurons. Strange begins to chant, undoing Doom's edits. But then Doom appears behind them, calm, almost disappointed. You think I'd leave my throne unguarded? Loki steps forward. No, we think you'd leave it bored. Doom tilts his head. Explain! And Loki smirks, that classic bittersweet smirk. You needed us to come here. You needed someone to bear witness, to tell you that you've won. Because even gods need applause. It's the oldest truth in storytelling. Pride always cracks perfection. For a fraction of a second, Doom hesitates. That's all Strange needs. He channels pure chaotic energy, the kind that Doom's symmetrical world can't process, and hurls it into the core. Reality convulses. Time resumes. The sky breathes. Every color explodes at once. Doom screams, not in pain, but in fury. You've undone order. Strange answers. I've restored life. The Citadel collapses into light. On the ground, the rebels feel the shift immediately. Wind returns, rain falls, sound echoes freely. Existence starts to live again. But the victory is temporary. Doom rises from the wreckage, his armor cracked but his power intact. "You can't destroy me," he growls. "I am reality now," and he proves it. He stretches his hand, and the sky itself forms his face, a colossal reflection of his will. Every living being feels their thoughts freeze. One by one, they start to forget who they are. Memories fade. Names vanish. Doom is rewriting minds. This is the true Doomsday, not destruction, but erasure of identity. Strange, barely standing, turns to Loki. "We need more than magic." Loki nods. "We need faith." They call out to the others through the collapsing reality. Sam hears them first, then Thor, then Wanda. One by one, the heroes remember who they are. Not because of power, but because of story. Sam recites Steve Rogers' old line, "I can do this all day." Thor remembers his mother's words. Wanda whispers the names of her children. Each act of remembrance becomes a spark that Doom can't overwrite. The concept is beautifully meta, narrative itself fighting back. The heroes join forces, channeling those memories into Strange's spell. The core reignites, this time fueled by emotion instead of control. The sky turns from sterile white to living color. Doom screams, "You can't maintain order with chaos!" Strange replies, "We're not trying to, we're maintaining life." The resulting explosion tears across Battleworld, splitting it into countless fragments, each fragment a reborn universe. The multiverse is coming back to life, messy, unpredictable, and free. Doom is hurled into the void between worlds, still glowing with God energy. As he drifts, he whispers, "This isn't over. Perfection is inevitable." And with that, he disappears into the nothingness. The heroes awaken among the ruins of the restored Earth 616. The sky is normal again, almost too normal. But the scars remain. Wong kneels beside Strange, exhausted. "We won," he says. Strange shakes his head. "No, we survived." Sam looks around at the fractured skyline. "Then that's enough for now." But the camera doesn't linger on them. It drifts upward, through the clouds, into the shimmer between universes. In the distance, we see countless new worlds forming, some familiar, some strange. Mutant universes, cosmic realms, timelines we've never seen. The multiverse is alive again. And in one of those newborn worlds, lightning strikes over a barren desert. A metal hand bursts from the sand. Doom's voice, faint but certain, whispers, "Round 2, and then silence." That's how it always begins after the end. Not with triumph, but with quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavier than any explosion. After the chaos of Battleworld, after the light storm that tore gods and galaxies apart, the camera opens on a single sound. The soft hum of wind moving through the ruins of what used to be New York. The streets are eerily familiar, yet wrong. Buildings rebuilt but uneven. The skyline stitched together from different versions of itself. It's Earth, yes, but not the Earth anyone remembers. Sam Wilson stands in the middle of it, his shield half buried in ash. The silence stretches. Then he says it. "We're back." Dr. Strange looks around, studying the skyline. Are we? Because that's the first twist of Act 5. The heroes didn't return to their world. They returned to a hybrid, an amalgamation of realities fused by the explosion that freed creation. Every universe Doom tried to erase now bleeds into every other. In one direction, Wakanda's towers shimmer beside Stark's demolished Avengers compound. In another, the ruins of Xavier's school stand right next to Kamar Taj. Everything exists, and yet nothing fits. This is the fallout of godhood. Doom's defeat didn't restore order, it fragmented it. And for the first time, the surviving heroes understand what the next war will be. Not against a villain, but against collapse itself. Wong calls it the convergence. Reed Richards, newly reappeared through a dimensional rift, calls it something else. an incursion cascade. But Strange knows the truth. "This is Doomsday," he says quietly. "The day we earned our name." From here, the story takes a darker, introspective turn, less about battles, more about philosophy. The Russos always loved exploring moral paradoxes, and this one's the biggest of all. If the cost of saving life is rewriting life, what does that make you? As the heroes regroup, Strange senses a disturbance in the air, the faint electric whisper of magic that doesn't belong. He follows it to an alleyway where a shimmering rift flickers like a dying flame. Out of it steps a hooded figure, Kang the Conqueror. But this isn't the version we know. His armor is damaged, his eyes weary, his tone almost respectful. "You stopped Doom," Kang says, his voice echoing across the alley. "Congratulations. You've done what even the Beyonders couldn't." Strange eyes him carefully. "You don't sound triumphant." "I'm not," Kang replies, "because you haven't stopped him. You fulfilled his plan." That's when the real revelation hits. Kang explains that Doom never intended to win permanently. His war with the Beyonders was never about dominance. It was about data. He needed to observe how creation reacted to collapse. When the explosion restored the multiverse, Doom's essence scattered with it, embedded across realities like a virus. Every new world now carries a fragment of Doom's consciousness, silently evolving, learning, preparing. He's no longer a man or a god. He's a system. Strange is horrified. "You're saying he planned to lose?" Kang nods. "Because in loss, he became eternal." It's a concept so pure and terrifying that it changes everything we thought we knew. Doom's doomsday wasn't destruction, it was distribution. The moment he was shattered, he seeded himself across the multiverse. Every act of creation now contains a trace of Doom's perfection algorithm. That's the Russos' style again. The villain's defeat turns out to be the victory. The heroes gather to discuss what comes next. Reed proposes building an interdimensional containment field using quantum threads, something that could isolate the Doom fragments. Wanda, now partially recovered, warns that such a structure might collapse the fragile balance of reality again. Thor slams his hammer down, frustrated. "Then what do we do? Wait for him to rise again?" Sam answers softly. "Maybe we prepare differently this time." The screen cuts to montage, the kind that feels like quiet rebuilding after apocalypse. Strange retraces the ley lines between dimensions. Reed and Shuri work together, combining Wakandan vibranium tech with quantum physics. The X-Men, led by Charles Xavier, begin recruiting survivors from collapsed universes. It's a rebirth of cooperation, a universe learning to breathe again. But beneath that hope, small signs of corruption appear. Reflections linger too long in mirrors. Digital devices display the number 616 repeatedly. A child draws Doom's mask without knowing who he is. The virus is spreading. Then, midway through the act, a haunting voiceover begins. Doom's voice, layered and distant, echoing through time itself. "You call me tyrant, you call me God, but I am neither. I am necessity. Where there is choice, there is chaos, and where there is chaos, there is me." As he speaks, we cut between realities, universes flickering like projector frames. In one, the Fantastic Four study energy readings. In another, Wanda's magic flares unpredictably. In another, Loki stands on the edge of the TVA's new timeline tree, watching branches twist uncontrollably. And in all of them, a faint metallic whisper resonates: Doom. This sets the stage for what fans have long speculated, the transition into Secret Wars. But before we get there, the story needs one final emotional anchor. That moment comes when Steve Rogers reappears. Not young, not old, just tired. The explosion that rewrote reality pulled fragments of timelines back together, including his. He wakes up beside Peggy's house, untouched by time, holding a photograph that flickers between two realities. One where they danced, one where they never met. Strange finds him there. "You shouldn't exist," he says quietly. Steve smiles faintly. "Yeah, that's been said before." The two men talk about choice, about the weight of every decision, and how even the smallest action can ripple across infinity. Steve asks, "If I hadn't stayed in the past, would any of this have happened?" Strange shakes his head. It would have happened differently, but it still would have happened. Because creation doesn't begin or end, it adapts. Steve looks toward the horizon, where the sun glows a little too bright, like a wound that hasn't healed. Then maybe that's our job now, to help it adapt. He hands Strange his compass, the one that once held Peggy's picture, for when you forget where you're going. It's a quiet passing of the torch, symbolic, not literal, because Strange, more than anyone, embodies what Steve always stood for, faith in impossible hope. But hope alone can't stop what's coming. Cut to the edge of reality, a black void filled with drifting fragments of broken universes. The camera moves through the debris until it finds a massive structure forming from the ruins, a world made of worlds stitched together by green energy. Floating continents, oceans hanging upside down, castles fused with skyscrapers, and in its center a single throne. Victor Von Doom, reborn in armor darker than before, stares out across his new dominion. His voice is calm, reverent. Battle world. He sits, not triumphant but solemn, like a man who understands the curse of his own dream. "They think they won," he says softly. "They think they restored freedom, but freedom is only the waiting room of order." As he speaks, the camera pans outward to show thousands of glowing fragments orbiting him, echoes of universes, each one containing a version of the heroes we know. Avengers, X-Men, Guardians, mutants, gods, all scattered across this stitched-together world. That's the moment it clicks. Avengers Doomsday isn't the end. It's the prelude, the setup for secret wars. Because Doom didn't just survive. He built the arena. He calls out to the void, "Let them come. Let them fight for their illusions. And when the dust settles, there will be only one world, mine." Thunder rolls. The scene shifts again. In the sanctum, Strange feels the tremor across reality. He opens the Book of Vishanti, and inside, a single word appears across every page. Doomsday was the beginning. He closes the book. Then the end, he says, must be war. The screen fades to black, but there's one more sequence, a mid-credits scene. We're deep inside the TVA. Loki stands before the loom, which now glows brighter than ever. Mobius walks up beside him. "It's stabilizing." Loki shakes his head. "No, it's reorganizing." Mobius squints at the streams of light forming across the branches. Into what? Loki watches as the branches twist together, forming the shape of a mask, Doom's mask, and whispers, "Into someone's design." And that, my friends, is why I believe Avengers Doomsday won't just be another crossover movie. It'll be the bridge that redefines the entire multiverse saga. It won't end with victory or defeat. It'll end with the question of control versus chaos, with Dr. Doom as both villain and philosopher. Think about it, every phase of the MCU has built toward this. The Infinity Saga was about balance. The Multiverse Saga is about consequence. And Doomsday will be the connective tissue between them. The story that shows us what happens when humanity itself becomes the variable the universe can't predict. I've broken this down layer by layer, but the craziest part is this. None of it contradicts what Marvel has already shown us. The breadcrumbs are everywhere, from Strange's fixed points in Multiverse of Madness to the TVA's Sacred Loop to Loki's final throne of branches. It's all leading here. And when Secret Wars finally drops, I think we'll realize something wild. That Avengers Doomsday was never just about Doctor Doom. It was about the audience. About us. About how we too keep chasing perfect endings in an imperfect universe. Because at the heart of every Marvel story, no matter how cosmic or catastrophic, there's always that same line Steve Rogers said years ago, "You get up and you fight again." That's what Doomsday will leave us with. Not despair, not fear, but that unkillable, irrational spark of human defiance. The belief that even when gods rewrite the rules, we'll find a way to rewrite them back. So yeah, I think this movie's going to be a masterpiece. The darkest, most philosophical, most emotionally charged chapter the MCU has ever attempted. And when the final scene fades and Doom looks out across his fractured world, I guarantee the audience will sit there in silence, the same silence that followed Infinity War. Because some endings don't end, they evolve. If you made it all the way here, you're officially part of the theory circle. Drop a comment if you caught details I might have missed, share your take, and tell me what you think happens next, because trust me, the Russos are not done playing with our minds yet. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, the biggest one I've ever done, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. It really helps keep the channel alive. And if you want to directly support MovieCast and all the crazy hours of research that go into these deep dives, hit that super thanks button and drop a $20 tip. It goes a long way in helping me keep bringing these cinematic theories to life. I'm Liam Harrison. This is MovieCast. And until next time, keep watching closely. Because the next clue to Secret Wars, it's probably already hiding in plain sight.